None of them will be offended. So Jim, if you want us, we can get started.
Okay, sure. Let's go ahead. Call to order, and I guess what public comment? Do we have anybody who wants to make a public comment?
There's
I was gonna
no
say
one.
we have a few housekeeping remarks, but
Okay,
no, really quick. And then we'll do and then roll call and then yeah, thank you.
okay, go ahead.
All right, my turn.
Yeah,
Yeah, take it away.
Okay. Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Service Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee. Thank you for joining us. We will begin at 1 p.m. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. To use the raised hand feature by phone, dial *9 on your phone's dial pad to raise your hand, and to use the same to lower your hand. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate this discussion. All Legal Service Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference, and please be aware of your surroundings behind you. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then select enable auto transcription. Troubleshooting tips. For those using Zoom on a computer, when on mute, hold down the space bar to temporarily unmute. If you use your phone to dial into the meeting, please be sure that your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid audio feedback issues. While joining audio via computer is highly recommended, if an individual loses audio, they can call in separately using the Zoom conference number. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Would you like me to do the roll, Jim?
yeah,
Okay. Meeker.
yep, here.
Aflagi.
Yes.
Iskin.
Yep, present.
Mahoney. Let us know that she would be absent. And Schreiber.
Here.
Great. We do have a quorum, Jim, and then I'll go through liaisons and staff. Selena Copeland from LAC. Melanie Snyder and Laura Brown from the Judicial Council. Oh, actually, I see someone from LAC raised their hand. So maybe Selena, Lauren, or Zach would like to be promoted. Let's see. We're gonna, if Kim, it's okay. I'm gonna promote LAC trainings in case it's one of our liaisons.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so we have LAC trainings. I just put Selena, Lauren, or Zach from LAC. It's Lauren. Okay, great. Thank you, Lauren. And then Melanie Snyder from the Judicial Council.
I'm about to promote her.
Wonderful, thank you. And also, Kim, if you see Laura Brown from the Judicial Council, you can promote Laura too.
Okay.
Thank you. And then for State Bar staff, hi, Melanie.
Hello.
Duan Nguyen, I don't think is with us yet. Chris McConkey is here. Jennifer Zelnick.
Here.
And Heidi Slater. And then we have Kim Wormsley. And did I miss any other State Bar staff?
Oh.
All right. Okay, Jim, we have a quorum, and that's it for roll call.
Okay, good. So I guess public comment now.
Great.
Great. And just to let you know, Chris and Jennifer, I'm doing this on an iPad, so I can only see 9 people at a time. So if the 10th person raises a hand, I can't see it.
I'll keep an eye on it for you.
Okay.
I don't see, Kim, if I'm looking at this correctly, any members of the public.
There's nobody.
Okay, good. So go on to item 3, approval of the minutes for December 1st, 2022. Anybody have any comments, corrections,
Move to
observations?
approve.
Okay, I'll second it.
So Schreiber moved and Meeker seconded. And now we, just as a housekeeping reminder, the chair now votes last. So we'll start with Aflagi.
Yes.
Iskin.
Yes.
Mahoney is absent. Schreiber.
Yep.
and Meeker.
Yes.
And motion carries. And I see Dwan is here too, just so everyone knows. Dwan. Okay, that's it for that one, Jim.
So now we go to homeless prevention grants, item number 4. 4.1, you want to give us an update, Chris?
Yeah, and we might have a slide for this one. It's like, I think it's just a proposed resolution with Jennifer. I'll let you share your screen. And I guess I can, while Jennifer's pulling up the slide for item 4.1. Dwan, Jim, Raul, anyone who has an opinion about this, just let me know. But we may not actually need this resolution, but we prepared it just in case it felt tidy to pass it. So I'll hand it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Zelnick, and I'm a senior program analyst in the Office of Access and Inclusion. Item 4.1 is to approve Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus's 2021 to 2023 Homelessness Prevention HP2 Formula Spend Down Plan. On December 13, 2022, the Commission passed a resolution requiring Asian Americans Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus to return the first 2 installments of its HP2 Formula Award due to failure to begin spending its grant as of December 1st, 2022. The resolution stated that the 3rd year of funding was contingent upon the submission of a spend down plan by January 10, 2023, submitted to the HP Funds Committee, to which the Commission delegated authority to determine its adequacy. Unfortunately, as you saw in the email from AJALC, they did not submit a spend down plan. As such, we present the following resolution with the caveats that Chris gave. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee, acting on behalf of the Commission under its delegated authority, finds that Asian Americans Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus declined to submit a spend down plan for its 2021 to 2023 Homelessness Prevention Formula Grant. In keeping with the Commission's December 13, 2022 resolution about AJALC, the State Bar will withhold the 3rd and final payment on AJALC's HP2 Formula Award in the amount of $83,757.
So the reason, this may not be strictly necessary, and I would defer to Raul or Dwan, but the resolution from the Commission meeting on the 13th just said payment of the 3rd year is conditioned on them submitting this plan, and they didn't. So that resolution kind of like operates already to preclude the 3rd payment, but we thought it would be nice for the committee to just make a finding that the spend down plan did not arrive.
I think that's right, Chris. Like, I don't know if it's absolutely necessary. I think you would still hold, but yes, out of an abundance of, to be super clear.
So any questions about this? We did share their email with you all. If you didn't see it, we did forward it. You can read it. They were very gracious, and our understanding is they had actually prepared a plan, but then there was a to spend down this final year's payment, but there was a development that made them question their ability to then stick to that plan, and just out of an abundance of like caution, they thought it would be responsible to go ahead and decline the 3rd payment. That's how I would characterize the tone of their email.
I move to adopt the resolution on the screen.
And I'll second that.
So Schreiber moved and Aflagi seconded. And then taking the vote, Aflagi,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Mahoney is, I think, still absent. Schreiber
Yes.
and Meeker.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries, Jim.
And I just want to add something on this. It's a slightly different issue, but I'm on the Rules Committee, and one of the things that we're looking at is approvals of budget modifications and carryovers, and trying to correct the rules so the situation that we had here won't ever occur again or be caught sooner. And one of the proposals is on discretionary grants, that adjustments to the budget goes back to the subcommittee that granted that discretionary grant as opposed to the entire commission. And I was just wondering if anybody here has strong opinions either way on that.
I guess I would just say, Jim, that my sense is that I have no objection to it going to the subcommittee or the committee, but it feels appropriate for the full commission. I don't know if you disagree with that, but
That was
Well-
actually Chris, my thought as well, is that I would think that it needs to be absorbed back into the commission and then earmarked for the subcommittee. But if there's something in the rules that says otherwise, if you could just tell us a little bit more about that thinking and the process of how you arrived there.
Well, the thinking is that the subcommittee that handled all the discretionary grants are the ones that are most familiar with those grants as far as looking at their budget. And they also have that subcommittee has a scoring team that was involved in going over the budgets, as opposed to trying to educate the entire commission, seeing as how that the number of discretionary grants that we seem to be granting these days has really grown exponentially. Whether or not, like say, the entire commission needs to be involved with the bank grants committee when they're looking at revised budgets, or the homeless prevention committee when they're looking at revised budgets. But, you know, we're just trying to streamline the process. And that's a proposal that's being kicked around. Of course, the entire commission would have to approve that eventually when it comes before that. I just wanted to, since we're one of the few subcommittees that have had to deal with a major budget revision, like in this case, where they didn't spend any of the money, whether or not you like the idea. I mean, because last commission meeting, they did decide to send it back to us because we're the ones that granted the grant in the first place. So
Jim, so I'm not following what the proposal is. Are you saying that, we're talking about budget modifications and carryovers, that sort of thing?
yes,
And so I have this idea in mind that staff has some authority to grant approval for budget carryover, budget changes and carryovers within a certain percentage. If it goes above a certain percentage, it's got to go to somewhere, the commission, I guess, right now.
the commission, right. And we're
So-
saying that if it's a discretionary grant, not a formulary grant or anything like that, but a discretionary grant, it ought to go to, instead of the entire commission, ought to go to the subcommittee that approved the grant to begin with.
I mean, I personally, I agree with that. I think that, I mean, I'd actually be more in favor of almost giving staff more authority. I mean, the commission, usually spends like 20 seconds on these things. And I totally agree that in most cases, the more appropriate forum for looking at these things is the relevant committee, not the commission as a whole. I think it's a waste of the commission's time most of the time to deal with these things. Now, maybe if you have something really significant like this, maybe you could the committee could exercise its discretion to refer it to the commission. But most cases are just sort of no-brainers.
although, this example sort of illustrated where the committee and the commission disagreed. I mean, I was sort of in the camp of being sort of less sympathetic in the committee. We went to the commission. The commission was like, please be more sympathetic, and then charged the committee with executing on that. So I don't know, I guess I might have been more inclined to agree with you, Eric, except for this experience sort of feels like it offers an object lesson in the opposite outcome.
Yeah. This is a kind of a unique case, but most of the time, I think the situation is like somebody wants to vary their budget by 26%, something like that, or their spend down plan. It's just sort of I don't know. Just seems like
I agree with you, Eric. If it's something this large, I think it should go back to the commission. I do believe that balance needs to be there between the commission and the committee. But the others, like for example, the example you gave of 26,000 or so, I think it should be housed and it should be housed with the staff, where they have discretion and agility to be able to move and respond to some of these smaller adjustments.
Just to chip in with one staff member's perspective, is staff sort of looks at budget revisions and carryover requests as being distinct to support what Bonacci was just describing just now. Staff already sort of thinks as budget revision carryover requests as being distinct from having to relinquish funds from an award that has been made, like in a grant agreement that has been signed. Like that in this case, well, it just is a matter of like process. HALC never actually submitted a revision request. It was the committee and commission ended up requiring it to submit a spin down plan, but they never went through the formal budget revision process. Like this situation where they lost their first and second year of funding and ended up losing and declining their third, kind of all happened outside the formal budget revision process. And to my knowledge, budget revisions and carryovers don't typically result in having to give funds back before the end of the grant period. Maybe if a carryover gets denied, but they would still get to kind of keep their full award until the end of the grant period. And then if they had something left over, they might get invoiced for that. And in this situation, they're being invoiced before the end of the grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know there's differences of opinion. I'm just giving people a heads up. I mean, we're still in the process of getting comments from the grantees through LAC. And once we get those, we'll probably be having a formal proposal to the commission as a whole down the road later this year.
And how does staff feel about this proposal, Jim?
Well, I don't know. We didn't get strong pushback. Let's see.
We have Dwan on.
Dwan's, but I think Heidi was involved with some of those discussions, right, Heidi?
Right,
Yeah,
I don't.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Dwan.
I was gonna say, yeah, that, there's a distinction between what we feel like the budget revision piece and the carryover. And I think the carryover piece is what usually the commission would like to see more and discuss more at that level. And also if we're asking for money back, I think in those instances, the level of like severity is like raised.
And,
so I think
oversight. I
Yeah,
think that's
oversight.
really
Yeah.
the large part of this. It's the full commission
Yeah.
is responsible for that oversight.
And budget revisions haven't been, there haven't been as many cases where we like deny that. Usually it's clear whether it's qualifying or not. But I do think for budget revisions for the committee in particular, that's probably the best place, like Jim was saying, because you guys are familiar with the application and you have reviewed it and reviewed the reporting. So if say a project now is deciding to like modify an approach or adding like accounting or adding a strategy, whether that should be funded or not. I think the committee is in a better position to approve that or not.
I agree with the thinking behind it is sound. I agree with it. I'm just wondering, going back again to the commission's role. My concern is the commission's role and our oversight of all the funds. That's the only hesitation that I have, but the thinking behind it is sound. Thank you for bringing it up with us, Jim.
Well, you'll be coming around again when it gets more formalized. I just thought, given the situation, I'd like to get a few comments. It's good to know that there are differences of opinion. Okay, I guess we should go on to.
Dawn has her hand up.
Okay.
I just want to, I hope this can be built into the March commission agendas, just so that we update. I think the commission wanted an update, and so we can let them know about it, because I know there are a lot of opinions around, and this we'll tie it up. Go on.
Okay, so can we go on to 4.2?
Sure.
Back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. So item 4.2 is to approve the request for proposals and scoring rubric for the 2023 to 2024 Homelessness Prevention Supplemental Competitive Grants, or HP4 Supplemental. Today's agenda includes background about the grant making timeline, the proposed rubric, selection criteria, the application, reporting, and finally, the proposed resolution. The Budget Act of 2022 allocates $30 million in state funds for competitive awards to qualified legal services projects and support centers to provide homelessness prevention legal services. This includes up to 5% or $1.5 million for administrative costs, leaving $28.5 million for competitive grants. The Budget Act gives statutory preference for applications that serve rural or underserved communities, as well as those who partner with or subgrant to CBOs or local jurisdictions, provided that the partnerships were in effect as of June 30, 2022. On December 13, the Commission approved 46 HP4 grants totaling $25,229,306. Since this amount is less than the total available funding, the Commission delegated authority to the committee to develop a supplemental funding application and score and approve the awards for the remaining $3,270,649. The Budget Act outlines permissible uses for HP4, which are the same as HP3. Eviction defense, other tenant defense assistance in landlord-tenant rental disputes, or services to prevent foreclosure for homeowners, including pre-eviction and eviction legal services, counseling, advice, and consultation, mediation, training, renter education, and representation. Additionally, legal services to improve habitability, legal services to increase affordable housing, ensuring receipt of eligible income or benefits to improve housing stability, legal help for persons displaced because of domestic violence, and homelessness prevention as a catch-all category for anything missed. This is the proposed grant-making timeline. The dates listed are approximate in order to accommodate applicant, commissioner, and staff availability and needs. Today, we are meeting for the committee to approve the RFP and scoring rubric. Staff will release the application on February 10, and the application will be due a month later on March 10. The next two items are highlighted to indicate that there is a small degree of flexibility in these dates. Staff propose a commissioner staff team will score the applications between approximately March 14 and April 11. These exact dates would be 28 days, meaning it is a tight turnaround for the scoring team. Staff proposed the committee meets to approve awards around April 26. Of course, this date can be made slightly later to accommodate commissioner schedules and to give the scoring team some more time. However, the meeting cannot be moved significantly later because the grant period starts July 1st, and this ensures grantees will have a year to spend down these funds at minimum, as will be explained more on the next slide. I will note that an activity not included in this timeline is a calibration meeting. Normally, the committee meets to score a few applications together as a means of calibrating for the scoring team its values and preferences. However, since the committee calibrated HP4 grants in October of 2022, based on the exact same rubric we propose using for HP4 supplemental grants, we feel this step can be skipped, saving the committee from needing to meet again in mid-March after the scheduled March 1st meeting. So before moving to the next slide, perhaps this is a good time to discuss the scoring team. Staff suggests a scoring team composed either of 2 commissioners and 3 staff, which was how HP4 was scored, or a team of 1 commissioner and 2 staff. Given the timeline, does the committee want to discuss how to proceed with the scoring team?
How many applications do you anticipate, or do you have any idea? Can you even ballpark it?
I honestly have no idea. I will say that we have gotten indications of enthusiasm and intent to apply from a few organizations. We've started to circulate information about a webinar for applicants, and we have a good turnout thus far. So it's really hard to say.
I mean, so will the scoring team, and particularly the commissioners on that team, be expected to review every application?
Yes, that's our understanding that as with HP4, each member of the scoring team would review each application. So it will be an intensive process.
Well, it does, I mean, at least for me, I guess everybody's got things to do, but that's kind of a busy time for me. I'm just, if we're talking about 30 applications, that's a lot. If it's 20, it's less. I don't know. I guess you don't really know. So perhaps there's nothing.
If I had to I don't know where I'm getting this from, but because we had was like 45 or so or 46 like initial HP4 applications, and because they're still spending down HP2 and HP3, and we're kind of hearing that a lot of them feel like they can't absorb much more this next year. I, in my head, for some reason, have started thinking of it as being like 10 to 15 supplemental applications, but just watch, it'll only be like 25 or something. But I just I'd be shocked if it was like 20 or more.
So
And-
I was gonna say, if I had to guess, 20 or 30 applications.
Oh, there you go. Well, do that because that's the more that's the like safer number. Then your
Um,
expectations are really managed. Let's go.
And
with
then
that
the one thing that when I was working with Jennifer, I said that because it's supplemental, we wanted to really try to streamline the application. So questions are unnecessary, take it out. Really a supplemental application and funding. It's not a whole new. So I'm hoping that will help speed up the review, Eric, if that helps.
And
And
I'll
Eric-
also, oh, sorry,
Eric,
Jim.
Yeah, Eric, I should say too, as chair, I've already volunteered. So it's a question of, are you guys comfortable with just me as the only commissioner, or do you want to have another commissioner on the scoring team?
Well, the easy button is to say we're comfortable with you, Jim.
Yeah.
Well, that was easy. Yeah.
I don't know but one thing I will say, I know you I appreciate your consideration of, wanting to limit meetings. I actually found the initial calibration meeting to be helpful. I mean, you're saying we've done this fairly recently, so maybe we don't need it, but I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to go with the flow if people don't want to do it, but it seems to me to kind of get everybody's head back in the game, it actually might be helpful to have that calibration, but I don't feel that strongly about it. I mean, I'd be willing to do it, participate in that.
Duan has her hand up, and then I will make my comments.
I was gonna say, we always welcome Jim. He's great as chair and everything. I do want to encourage one more commissioner. And the reason being is a diversity of like scorers. And, I've been on a lot of scoring team too. I'm trying to just remove myself so that the other staff and there's like more diversity in terms of scoring is my only pitch for one more commissioner.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have a second commissioner because I thought that meeting was helpful. This time frame is really rough for me. I have trial right in the middle of this, so maybe we could check with Tammy.
We
to
would
see
have
if if she's available since she's not here. But
Well, can I ask, well, Bonifay, you had your hand up, so I'll let you talk.
I'm literally looking at my calendar right now. So let's look at this in real time and in real form. So we'd receive the applications when? On the 14th of March?
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be on the 10th because we have to collate them. But if they are due on March 10th, I could get them to you on the 13th. So, but that really then makes it difficult, I would say, to actually have the scoring team meet on the 14th because we would want to score a number of applications during each session, and it might not be worth it to meet until everyone had sufficient time to read a certain number of applications.
Right. So then we wouldn't really be meeting on the 14th as it states here, correct?
Probably not.
Right.
No.
So then when do you think you would anticipate?
I think certainly later that week would be appropriate, around the 16th or the 17th.
Okay.
Yeah. But what happens for the scoring is once we know who's participating, I'll send out a very detailed doodle, which I know everyone loves, and we'll pick meeting times that work for everyone.
Do you see us going, so you have us until the 11th of April. How many
Mhm.
you see us reviewing each time we meet?
That really will depend on the flow of the scoring team. But what I will say is for HP4, which we know was undersubscribed, we were able to review between 10 and at times, I believe, 16 or 17 applications in one session. I know that that process will look different if we are not undersubscribed, because we'll have to make, I would say, some harder decisions. But I do think we can be fairly efficient.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be as not involved. Of course, we'll pay, read, it's supplemental funding. So you've already made a determination that these applicants, they've already received HP funding, right? So you already made a statement or decision that they're worthy of being funded. So I think the staff can come with like an update on, we could do a bit more legwork, say, update on like, did they meet their deliverables? And maybe if they're adding an attorney, that's probably an easy yes. If they didn't meet their deliverables, then maybe they're in the no section unless we're undersubscribed. I mean, we could do more legwork.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying that it's really just a matter of tacking on a service to something that's already been approved, a service or something like that, or a person or staff or whatever?
Not entirely. That is one of the ways that grantees could use this funding. But that is not the only way that they could use the funding.
They could pitch a whole new project if they wanted. So.
But some of them are fall in the supplemental
Yeah, but they would have to have received HP funding
in the past.
at least once before. Yeah, but the HP4 supplemental project could be something different and new if they would.
I may regret what I'm about to say.
This is exciting.
But I can act as the second individual.
Oh,
We just
wonderful.
have to really
Thank you.
work with my calendar, please. There's just I'm looking at it and there's a lot. So
yeah.
I
Thank you,
promise
Jennifer.
that we will work with your calendar, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
thank you, Jennifer.
And maybe we can pre-schedule that if that's the case. Like, we don't have to wait until like closer. Like maybe, like Jennifer, you can work with Bonnie and Jim in the upcoming days or week to get all the meetings scheduled.
That sounds great. I will do that.
Really helpful. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay.
Jim, we get to work together again.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Are you sure? We're gonna need to become bosom buddies.
Great. So moving to the next slide, besides the statutory parameters for these funds, staff proposed the following, and we've already discussed this a bit. So first, we propose limiting HP4 supplemental grants to current QLSPs and support centers that have received any homelessness prevention formula and or competitive grant. So that is HP 1, 2, 3, or 4. We know that this does not significantly limit the applicant pool, but we do feel that doing so would streamline the application process as we've discussed, because all of the applicants would have already been vetted to do homelessness prevention work. Because there's just over $3.27 million available, excuse me, I lost my place. Okay, there it is. Because there is just over $3.27 million available, staff proposes a budget cap of $325,000 and no minimum amount for awards. While the statutory expenditure date of June 30, 2024 remains, applicants could claim back expenditures for the quarter prior to the grant's start. This means grants would be either 12 or 15 months long. The proposed budget cap would balance flexibility for applicants to implement standalone projects or expand existing programs while funding at least 10 awards. Applicants may propose expanding or extending existing HP grants, such as by hiring an additional attorney or expanding services to an additional county. Applicants may also propose expanding creative partnerships with IOLTA and non-IOLTA providers, and may subgrant a portion of their award to one or more partners. The proposed rubric would be a tool to guide evaluation. Scores would not guarantee funding, and the committee could exercise discretion to make awards that accomplish the goals of the Budget Act. This may include a post-rubric analysis to consider how grants are distributed statewide and to account for a diversity of HP interventions. As mentioned earlier, staff proposed using the same rubric as was used for HP4. This rubric scores applications out of 100 points and has 6 categories. The top category is project impact and strategies, and this relies on a range method. Applications that exceed expectations can score between 21 and 25 points. Those who meet expectations score 11 to 20 points, and those who fall below expectations score 1 to 10 points. The other 5 categories are administration, serves rural populations, serves underserved populations, project evaluation, and partnerships. These 5 categories are scored based on fixed values. Those who exceed expectations receive 15 points for the category. Those who meet expectations receive 10 points, and those below expectations score 5. The HP4 scoring team found this rubric to be an effective tool in their decision-making process. And because staff proposed a very similar application for HP4 supplemental grants, we are confident the rubric will work well again. Pausing there to see if there are any questions about that.
I had one, I'm not sure it's directly about that, but will
Sure.
we have evaluation data for these projects or projects that may be related to what they're proposing now in front of us so that we can see how they've been doing?
So I think something that we can do, which I believe Dwan suggested, is staff can go ahead and gather information about how these grantees have performed with whatever HP funds they've already received. Whether that's specifically evaluation data or looking at things like deliverables and how much of their budget they've spent, we can certainly provide that information.
But you all have, you have a login on Smart Simple, and I think you have access to all of this. And if you don't, then I don't know, Chris, maybe you can ask Crystal to enable that, the reports for the commissioner, because they used to have access to it if they don't now.
No, that's right. But if it's sometimes hard to manipulate.
It is hard. And that's why we're happy to, the staff, like Jenna was saying, take a first stab at reporting it back to you. But if you wanted to go and pull it yourself, you're welcome to do that.
Eric, is part of your question, what's been kind of an ongoing question with these is metrics and data on impact?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's been our ongoing, that our thoughts have ongoingly been there. And I'm not sure what we've gathered from some of the experts in the field that we've brought, some of the symposiums that we've put on, what have we been able to capture per applicant in terms of measurable results, right?
Well, if we had that, it would be fantastic. That may be pretty sophisticated. It'd be wonderful if we could get it. I was even just looking more simplistically, like how many people did they say they would serve? How many did they serve? that sort of thing.
And Chris has his hand up. I think he might answer that question, Eric, because the DOF report, Chris, goes back, and I think that's the easiest for the commissioner, right? To, at their fingertips, like look up a program and see.
Yes, so the reports that the Judicial Council is filing with the Department of Finance, which I know we still need to share with the commissioners, because the DOF's website was down because they got hacked, and so it just got filed with them. That's going to be the most careful presentation and easy presentation of the data. I raised my hand because I just wanted to flag if this is going to be a criterion that the scoring team might look at, or the committee wants the scoring team to look at. I'm unsure that it fits in the current rubric as presented on this slide. Jennifer, I don't know which row you would stick that in, but we might need to wordsmith a row if we wanted past HP grant performance, like performance to deliverables, to make sure that was in bounds.
Well, why might it not? Why wouldn't it impact project impact and strategies? For example, if somebody says they're gonna do X and they're gonna serve 1,000 people or something, but we know historically they've underperformed by 50% or something like that. Well, maybe we wouldn't give them anything if that was the history, but we could maybe apply some some reasonableness to their forecast and impact that dimension.
I was just thinking the same thing, Eric.
Exactly.
It's that category, but
Yeah.
to be completely transparent, Chris and Jennifer, what you could do is in the RFP though, maybe elaborate and say your evaluation or something, but I do think it fits nicely in that project impact, even if we didn't say anything, but.
Great, so we can leave it as the way it's worded here on the rubric. I think Jennifer, in the resolution, we might just want like where the resolution approving the RFP as presented in today's materials. If we want to like add like and specify that the criterion quote project impact and strategies end quote is inclusive of past HP grant performance or whatever. Like just when we get to that slide, just to okay.
Great.
So no one comes back later and they're like, hey, they looked at something that wasn't allowed, or you know what I mean? It's just,
If you don't mind, I would love your help remembering
I
that when we
can
get to that
suggest
point.
some phrasing when we get there. Yeah, but that's okay. If we don't need to change the rubric, then we can leave the slide looking the way it is. Yeah.
And just, not to belabor this point, but it really is important for us to be able to show how these funds are being spent, not just that they were spent, but really what did we move the needle in any way, anywhere with these funds? And we're about to go into another financial, potentially recession. There's these conversations, second quarter of this year going into next year. So these funds are the kind of dollars that can be limited as we continue in this financial I don't even know what to call it really yet. So you understand what I mean. I think these are important metrics to have. And even if we weren't going into a financial slowdown, they're just important to have to be able to tell the story of, where are all these dollars going? So however we can capture past performance to be able to help us into future dollars as well as future ideas. And this is now going back to Christian and those creative potential ideas, the better it is for everyone, obviously.
Great, thank you. I think that's really a helpful framing. So, excuse me, moving on to the application, staff proposed an application that is essentially the same as HP4 with a few technical modifications to account for the different grant period and budget cap. It will include a profile with high-level information about the project, such as the award request, other funding, and project abstract. Detailed information about the project, such as the need, clients, whether the project serves rural and/or underserved populations, partnerships, goals, activities, deliverables, and strategies for outreach, accessibility, and evaluation will also be required. The budget will ask for information about how the program would spend the funds and will require programs to specify whether they will have a 12 or 15-month project timeline. The budget narrative will provide information about each budget line item, and the assurances will mirror those of HP4 to ensure compliance with the grant and the state bar, with some technical modifications again. Reporting will be similar to HP4, with the caveat that agenda item 4.3 details staff's proposed minor changes to the HP grant reporting. There will be an annual expenses report, an annual services report, and a final evaluation report. The annual services report will include main benefits that are relevant to HP4 supplemental funds and whether they're verified, geographic and demographic data tied to verified or not verified outcomes, the highest level of services where there was an attorney-client relationship, aggregated data about all other services, economic benefits when possible, and for support centers, quantitative and qualitative data about trainings, convenings, research, and other support for qualified legal services projects. Finally, any other data necessary to comply with state reporting requirements. Yes, Eric.
What does verified mean?
Chris, I am going to defer to you on this. That's okay.
So the homelessness prevention data collection tool has a column that says verified / not verified, yes or no. So when the HP grantees are selecting an outcome for each sort of matter, so the outcome would be like prevented an eviction or secured the public benefit or something. When they're selecting the outcome, what they're really doing at that stage of the data collection tool is they're selecting that was the goal of the service, that's what the client intended or wanted to happen. And then it's in the next column that they say whether or not that outcome can be verified or not. We used to not have the verified, not verified column. We used to just have the select the outcome column, but then we couldn't tell if it was just the client's like goal for the service or if it was actually accomplished. So we needed a way to be able to tell, is it just like this was the goal of it and we don't, know whether or not it was successful or it was unsuccessful or this actually worked. So the reporting instructions sort of explain to the grantees like how to complete the tool and how to use that column, but that's the verified, not verified.
Thanks, Chris.
I don't know if Eric, if you want like a follow-up question about that. But.
Just give me one benefit. Can you just give me one example of how it could be verified or not?
Yeah, so before we added that column, one of the most common outcomes is prevented eviction. It's like housing code number 1. It's like the most important of the housing code. So HO1 is prevented an eviction. Before we had that column, I think the way the HP grantees had to navigate it was they would select HO1, prevented an eviction, and then what the instructions used to say was something like, only select it if you can verify that that eviction was actually prevented, that it actually succeeded. And it wasn't that the client lost in court or something like that. So they would select HO1 if it worked. And then if it didn't work, if the client lost in court or maybe the provider wasn't sure what happened, they used to not just select the code at all and they would leave it blank because that was how they would indicate that it was not verified, that it was a successful outcome. So instead, now we have them report an outcome for every service, regardless of whether or not it was successful or could be verified, and then take the additional step of indicating if it was if they can verify that it was successful.
Okay.
Sorry, that was wordy, but that was hopefully shed a light on it.
So they say they prevented 3 evictions verified. That means they've confirmed that it happened. That's
correct. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, if they say not verified, they're just saying it was the goal of the service. Because otherwise there'd be no moment where they would tell us what the goal of the service was. So that it's like we want to know what they were trying to do, even if it was unsuccessful or couldn't be confirmed.
Okay.
But then we need an extra step to collect the information whether or not they could verify that it was successful.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the resolution?
Quick comment on the issue of impact. Last Tuesday, I got an email addressed to me along with several others from Selena Copeland. And she was talking about the memos that were included in last week's Judicial Council meeting where they had the HP3 reports. And she was commenting on how helpful the numbers on impact were, especially on the issue now that we require collection of household size data, showing the extensiveness to which these monies are having an impact on individuals. Whereas in the past, the bar would only count number of clients. Now they include data on household size, so you can really show the overall impact of these funds. So at least Selena, who does a lot of lobbying for funding with the legislature, is finding these data very helpful.
That's really good to know. Thanks, Jim. Other questions or comments before we move to the resolution? Okay. So this is how it's currently worded. Should the committee concur with staff's proposal, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee, acting on behalf of the Commission under its delegated authority, approves the priorities, rubric, and distribution plan for the 2023-2024 Homelessness Prevention Supplemental Competitive Grants as described in staff's memo dated January 23rd, 2023.
I'll move.
So
Oh.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I don't know if Dwan, Jim, do you, my sense was that maybe this needed an extra, like with the following addition, colon, that this row of the scoring rubric will look at past performance, or if you don't think that's necessary and that this is fine as is. Okay, I'm seeing Eric shaking his head. He doesn't think that's necessary.
I don't think it
I
is.
don't either.
Okay.
Me neither.
You're going to add that languaging into.
Well, so if you pass this resolution as written on the screen, you're passing the RFP as posted for today's meeting, and staff will not make any changes other than maybe like technical changes for formatting or typos. But we wouldn't make a substantive change. So
That's
if you're comfortable with the way it was posted for today, then this resolution is good to go.
Just for clarity, it was my understanding that, as Eric mentioned, and we agreed that it would be placed, the conversation that we're having would be placed in the existing top column or for impact and strategy. And
It was the
that
top
you
one.
would, right, and that you would leave the language as is and then add in the RFP additional languaging on what we mean by that. Is that correct?
So I think if you wanted us to add any language to the RFP, we would want to specify it in this resolution or change the way the resolution is worded to not pass the RFP as posted with today's materials. I don't know if Dwan, if you have an, just because this resolution references like
Oh,
a dated posting.
It says as
Oh,
described.
I see,
Yeah.
as of January of today.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I was like with the following edition, or we would just need to like wordsmith that. I mean, maybe I'm being like too hyper technical or something,
I think you are. It says as described, not as specifically stated, in the memo. So I think the minor change to a description of one of the rubric categories seems to me fits within that.
Yeah. It's a clarification. I mean, and anybody like has a qualms can go back and watch this recording. They obviously, I think it's okay.
Okay.
So just for my own understanding, we're not thinking about changing the resolution, but we are going to add clarification to the RFP itself, or we're
No,
not?
you can add clarification. You can add clarification. I just tuck in a phrase or a sentence that the project impact, you don't have to do in the scoring rubric itself, but in the RFP will include review, or may include, why don't you say may include review of past HP evaluations, something like that.
Great, thank you.
So does Raul want to weigh in on this before I move again?
Yes. So, I mean, I think both explanations are reasonable. The description here doesn't require specificity, but in the abundance of caution, I also think we could revise this simply to either not reference the exact date of the memo or include some language to the effect of what type of factors being considered. I think either approach is fine.
Do you have a recommendation, Raul? What do you prefer us to do?
I think we should maybe, if I had to pick one or the other, we can make a slight revision to this resolution if someone could propose that.
Do you want to offer a suggestion, Raul?
So give me a second. Why don't we say, sorry, remind me of the factor whether you wanted to change there or the rubric.
It's for the project impact, or is it easier to say in
We-
staff's memo dated January 23rd, 2023, and the HP discussion today or something like that? So it's
Yeah,
a
I
little
think
more
that's-
broad.
I like that. That's,
Okay.
I think
that's
that's fair.
tidy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
Would you like me to say on January 23, 2023 there as well? Just to be very clear.
I think you could probably say in today's meeting because the resolution will
Yeah.
be dated.
Okay.
And we have the meeting minutes, so. they
Mhm,
can
and
go to-
recording. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
Thank you, Raul. All right, so then I will move to accept this proposal.
I'll second.
Right. Sorry, everyone, I was on mute. I'm just pulling up the vote sheet. Okay, so Flaggy moved and Iskin seconded.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Flaggy,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Mahoney, still absent, Schreiber,
Yes.
and Meeker.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer.
Wonderful. Should we move to item 4.3?
Yeah, sorry. I thought
Sorry, I have to scroll through all these slides again.
No, take your time.
Oops, okay, there we are. So next on the agenda is item 4.3, approve changes to homelessness prevention grant reporting. First, I'll provide some background information on this agenda item. Then, if the committee wants, we'll review each of the updated grant reporting requirements by looking at redline versions for HP 2, 3, and 4. Finally, we'll review the proposed resolution. While analyzing the data and compiling the first annual report for the HP 2 and 3 grants, staff noticed that support centers did not have many opportunities to report quantitatively on their services to QLSPs because quantitative data mostly focused on services to indigent Californians. This means that some support centers appear to be doing much less work than they are actually accomplishing. Staff recommends updating the reporting requirements for HP 2, 3, and 4 grants in order to better capture the work of support centers, specifically outputs such as the number of trainings, convenings, etc. The proposed changes would improve the completeness and precision of HP 2, 3, and 4 data, and by extension, reports to the legislature and public. These reports could make a stronger case for future funding for homelessness prevention legal aid. The major change, as you saw in the posted materials, is to add the following language to the reporting requirements. Quote, for support centers, quantitative and qualitative data about trainings, convenings, research, and other support for qualified legal services projects, end quote. Additionally, we have included some minor changes which we have not redlined because they are technical formatting changes, such as replacing Roman numerals with Arabic numerals. These technical changes reflect efforts to make the requirements in HP documentation more uniform. So now, would the committee want to review each of the red line versions, or would you prefer to proceed to the resolution?
And these were posted. Like
Yes.
if you looked at what was posted, these were the same. Yep.
I mean, I could proceed to the resolution.
I
Does
don't have any comments.
Nor I.
All right.
Wonderful. Okay, so should the committee concur with staff's proposal, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee recommends the changes to the 2021 to 2023 Homelessness Prevention HP2 grant reporting, the 2021/2022 to 2024 Homelessness Prevention HP3 grant reporting, and 2023 to 2024 Homelessness Prevention HP4 grant reporting as described in the red line materials for today's meeting.
Anybody would like to make a motion?
I'll move.
Yeah, oh, second.
Thank you. So Meeker moved and Schreiber seconded. All right. Aflaki,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Mahoney, I think is still absent. Schreiber
Yes.
and Meeker.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries, Jim.
Wonderful. That concludes my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Heidi, you're going to be up next. So I just, but I can give you like, if you need like 10 seconds. So the Oh, you're good. You're ready to go. All right. Well, I'll just turn it over to Heidi, who has her own slides to kickstart our staff report on HP grants monitoring. Thank you, Heidi, for both taking minutes today and presenting. Impressive.
Yeah, sure. Wait till you see the minutes. All right. So, hi, everybody. My name is Heidi Slater. I am a senior financial analyst with the Office of Access and Inclusion. And today, I just wanted to give the committee an update on some of the grant monitoring, particularly fiscal monitoring, as it relates to HP3 funding. So this is just intended to be informational and just kind of give you an update on what we're doing internally to manage these funds. Let me see. So just by way of reminder, the Homeless Prevention 3 grant funds require a different level of oversight from our office because the source of those funds are federal. And so per Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 200.332, we are under an obligation to have certain fiscal oversights in place and determine risk or try to assess risk ahead of time for federal compliance or for non-compliance with the federal requirements for the grant, and provide any technical assistance and or training or additional oversight based on the level of risk each grantee may pose. And so internally, what we did to manage this oversight responsibility is the staff developed what we're calling a grant management assessment tool. That's a two-part tool that there's a survey essentially that was sent out to all HP3 grant organizations, and they completed that, and it was a survey to determine their ability to be compliant with the federal regulations. And then internally, staff also completed a GMA for each of the HP3 grant organizations that also evaluated various compliance issues and oversight issues that based on historical practices. And based upon the review of all of those, the combined GMAs from both the staff and the organizations itself, particular HP3 grantees were selected for a desk review. And so the desk review is essentially a mini monitoring visit, except for it's not done in person and it's all done, sort of through an exchange of materials. And so it's really isolated to fiscal performance and limited program service deliverables. And so in the fourth quarter of 2022, the selected organizations were notified of the HP3 desk review and asked to provide documentations related to grant expenditures, cost allocation methodologies, and supporting documentation. We asked each organization to complete an internal controls questionnaire and supporting documentation for any legal services that they provided under the HP3 funding. We are currently in the process of reviewing and doing further testing, similar to our regular fiscal testing that we do in our regular monitoring visits. And we do anticipate that we will be finished and issuing final desk review reports by the end of the first quarter of 2023. And if needed, organizations will be asked to submit a corrective action plan if we identify any issues that would may appear to have compliance with the federal regulation issues. And just so you guys have a big picture idea of how grant expenditures are going thus far, we have reviewed the HP3 grant expenditures through the third quarter of 2022. The fourth quarter grant expenditures should be submitted shortly. So this is a snapshot of the first 3 quarters essentially of these 2 grants. And so the HP3 formula grants, there's 75 grants that we issued, a total of, so the first year budgets for those grants is $19,236,338. And through Q3, the first year expenditures for for HP3 formula grants are 11,728,000 approximately. So that represents, so they've spent 61% of their first year grant through the third quarter. So obviously the first quarter would, or the first 3 quarters is 75% of the grant period for that first year. So they are trending a little bit behind on the HP formula, but it is again the first year of these grants, so that's not unusual. For the HP3 competitive grants, we issued 23 grants in that group. The first year budgets are a little over $6 million. To date through Q3, HP3 competitive grants have spent like $3.3 million approximately. So that's just 54% of the total allocation for the year. So those are trending a little bit more behind than the regular formula grants, just FYI. And so for we looked at all organization spending for the first 3 quarters, and for those organizations who had spent less than 50% of their grant allocation for the first year, we reached out to them, and so that was a total of 29 grantees. We asked them to provide us an update with why they're spending, just kind of a summary update of why their spending was less than expected for this stage of the grant, and what they had, and any obstacles or challenges they saw to being able to fulfill the grant through the end of the grant period. As of today, 28 of the 29 grantees have responded, so we're still following up with that last grantee so that we have a full response. But in general, the responses sort of fell into these bigger categories. One, they had startup issues, and so their Q1 and Q2 grant spending was less than like a typical split, and so they had ramping up issues, and so they will be catching up with those as the grant progresses. Many organizations spoke to personnel hiring and retention issues, particularly among the attorneys. So that's a big challenge for a lot of our organizations out there right now. Excuse me. And then there were several grantees who were talking about having to sort of coordinate their other grant funding related to similar activities and kind of try to coordinate those grants with their HP3 funding. And so that was an obstacle that they were trying to deal. Almost exclusively, they have reported that they expect to be able to catch up in the 23 and 24 calendar years, and anticipate being able to fully fulfill their grant obligations. And
would they have to submit carryover requests, say at the end of 23, if they haven't spent, if they're off in their spending by 25 or 26 or 27%?
So internally, the current practice for multi-year grants is that you don't have to submit and we're trying to revise this, but we're calling year-to-year grants rollovers as opposed to carryovers. We're trying to use carryover for an after a grant year extension versus rolling funds from one year to the next. The current practice does not require a budget modification if they're rolling funds from one year to the next, unless they move them from a line item and the line item deviation exceeds 10% of their total grant award for the period. So that is an issue that in the budget committee that Jim referenced earlier, they are revisiting that and whether or not to require that for future multi-year grants, but that's currently not a practice that is in place. So they do not have any obligation to notify us that they have not spent money in the first year, and they don't have to do anything to request a rollover of funds into the second and third year. Okay. Oops, and so I think that's, yeah, so the next steps, we are going to finalize the initial desk review process that's taking a look at the 2022 grant year. We are going to continue to monitor the HP3 expenditure reports as they come in. We will be doing a grant assessment process again for 2023 to review the current grantee years, because we're required to do that risk assessment every year. And then, of course, any significant changes identified during the process will be brought back to this committee. And yes, Dawn, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to elaborate on that last question, Eric's. So they're not required to kind of request technically like a rollover is the terminology that we're using now. However, there's language, I believe, in the grant agreement that if they're like not making strides or if they're not meeting their deliverable and you all, like the commission decides that say, you know, for whatever reason, then there can be consequences or you can potentially, depending what it is, right? So it's not that you don't have like kind of authority to exercise, say, even if they haven't spent any money, but they're going to say they're going to spend it all in year 2 or 3, you can make there are things that you can do. So it's not to say that even though they're not obligated to, but if they haven't done anything for the grant or done minimally, you have discretion.
And I have been counseling my organizations when asked if they need to do a grant, a rollover request. I say you don't need to, but it would be helpful to, you know, for you to submit it to make sure that we're all on the same page. So, you know, I think, you know, I think the idea going forward is that we would all be more comfortable if there was, you know, parameters around rollover activities. And so to try to start kind of messaging that different and making it a voluntary thing as opposed to a requirement. But that is a change from current practice. And so that's the informational update I have for you on HP3 funding or monitoring and oversight. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, Chris.
Oh, mine's also a question. I was just going to say that the program team is conducting sort of a parallel review of the HP2 and 3. So Heidi, I think you were just describing HP3 spin down, and the program team is looking at HP2 and HP3 for the deliverables. And so in the same way that the fiscal team sort of compares spending reports to like award sizes and budgets as appropriate, the program team is comparing services numbers to like what they said they were going to try and do in their applications. And screening for qualifying work and that kind of thing. And as that's review is ongoing, we don't have any like results to share with you today, but we hope by the March 1st meeting that the committee has scheduled, if there's any findings you need to know about, we'll have them ready for you by then. And yeah, just to emphasize that, unlike for the first agenda item on today's meeting, which was about an HP2 award, where that particular program hadn't spent by over halfway through the grant period, it's really important that we be looking at spend down for HP3 at this point, but they're less than halfway through, so it's a little less scary. They're far enough along, they're like 1/3 of the way through the grant now that really we don't want to see $0 spent at this point. That is concerning, but there is time for some of them to catch up. Depending on how persuasive their explanations are.
And Chris and Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong, but also HP3 are federal monies which require quarterly reports, whereas the other grants are state money and our typical pattern is only to report at the end of the year.
That's correct. So we do have quarterly data on these. And so because it is federal funds and our oversight requirements are substantially higher, we will have ongoing, you know, review of those quarterly reports and be able to kind of see where any potential problems are a little earlier in the process, since we've got more data to work with.
Yeah.
Chris, can you tell us when the stuff that you've been reporting will become public so that we can pass it on to the rest of the commissioners?
Yeah, so this is for the HP2 and 3 data that we have so far. So I assume you're asking about those like reports that we just filed with the Judicial Council. Yeah, so those reports were statutorily due to the Department of Finance by January 1st. So we had told the commission on the 13th of December, like, we'll get that to you probably like right after the new year. And then I think Department of Finance got hacked or something. And their like website went down for 2 weeks. So they actually just got filed. So I have one that I can circulate. The HP3 report is ready to be circulated to the full commission now. And I was just waiting on the HP2 report. And I
Melanie
don't want to
said
put Melanie on the spot.
No, I was gonna say Melanie, I asked Melanie if she's here, but she said that they're ready to be, that we can send them out. this
Great. And
morning.
Melanie, I just think we don't have I think your JC just needs to send us the final HP2 report. I think maybe JC made a few edits to it. So that I just want to make sure I circulate like the final version.
And how about the Equal Access Fund report?
And that one's ready too.
That one's ready,
We
yeah.
did get that one back. So this week for sure, I think, yeah. And honestly, if I don't get HP2 right away, I'll just circulate in 2 batches. I'll do HP3 and EAF like today or tomorrow, and then we'll just do HP2 when we get it from the Judicial
Can you send it
Council.
to the full commission, Chris? Because that's what we said.
Yeah, my plan was to send it to yeah. Jim, if that's okay, we'll just send it to all the commissioners all at once.
Okay. Just let me know when you do, because I was going to forward that email from Selena to this subcommittee, but then I thought she includes links to both the EAF report and the HP3 report. So I didn't know if I could forward that.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can forward that right now. It's because I assume those are links to the Judicial Council's like posted materials or something. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
for last
public.
week.
You can, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of you to check in, but I think that's all public, and you can forward that whenever you like.
Okay.
Yep. Was there another question posed to me that I missed? No. Okay.
Oh, I just want to make raise my hand. In March, when Chris and Heidi bring back kind of a report of the desk monitoring and the expenditures reporting, the one thing to keep in mind is that, I think you're all aware that we're in not a great budget year. And so we definitely want to be able to be in a position to work with programs to spend down all the money. We will not be making a request for an extension of that period because we're in a bad budget. So just and we'll remind you all of that in March again.
Any questions for Heidi? Yeah, and I'll just say for the hey Jim just mentioned this, but for the HP3, it's federally funded, so we have to do quarterly reporting. Like that was the minimum intervals the federal government expected. The state government expects annual reporting. So that's why we have annual for HP2 and 4, but quarterly for HP3. If that felt awkward for anyone, that was the explanation. Like, I guess the commission could elect to have the HP2 and 4 grantees report more often if it wanted, and that staff could do like a cost benefit analysis, because it would obviously be more burdensome on the programs to do that, but maybe it's worthwhile. But it's currently calibrated to what the funding authority has said they want, the minimum that they needed, and that's what we tied it to.
Do we know, this has nothing to do with your reporting item, but just occurs to me, Newsom, I think, just released his budget. I know we're very early in the budget cycle this year. Do we have any sense for whether there's going to be a continued stream of HP funding?
Not for HP. And the Governor Newsom released his budget a few weeks ago. And so there's not an HP5, a new pot of HP money. There is a line item, and we already knew this was coming for the, Chris, can you remind me? I can't remember if it's the 20 million for HP4, HP3, but we had already accounted for that money for HP3 when we were distributing the RFP. So we already knew, they had assured us that money was coming. And so you all based your allocation based on that. So it's not new money. So we're not going to be working on another RFP for this upcoming year for next year.
That's right.
And I don't think anybody expects any more federal money.
Not at this time.
Yeah.
The only thing that was additional in that the governor's budget is money for care court funding, which we'll talk at more length at the commission meeting. But just to summarize, they allocated $6.1 million for legal services for the 7 counties that are being rolled out for the first cohort 1 for this upcoming budget cycle. But again, we'll have an agenda item that will discuss that separately at the commission meeting in March.
We may not have a federal government, Jim, and, you know, debt runs out.
I might run out of money. And I was just gonna add that I've kind of like the thought just sort of slipped my mind, but I was gonna say, but even if there's, just so you know, well, I think I hope the state of California continues to invest in homeless prevention and legal aid indefinitely. I think for this very next year, hopefully this is correct from all programs. There's enough money to be spent down for 2023 because HB 2, 3, and 4 will all be funding 2023. That like for this year, it won't necessarily lead to like an awkward 1-year gap in like funding for services. If my hope is that HP funding can resume though, starting in like the next budget act after this one. So there isn't like a gap in funding for services. But because the commission had the foresight to make multi-year awards, it kind of softens by at least a year the blow for like if a budget act skips funding for HP legal aid.
Even more so, not to belabor the point, even more so the need for the data.
Mhm.
It's so critical
Yep.
to be able to show that impact, to tell the right story when, you know, you need these folks to support this pot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it's still a little too early, I suppose, to know for sure that there won't be some HP grant making of some kind in the fall. But if there isn't, it's a good year for the HP funds committee staff members and the commissioners on the committee to focus on data collection and analysis, grant monitoring and the like. It's a nice opportunity to whereas some of that attention would have gone to grant making, there's still plenty of important public policy work to be done, I think. Heidi, was there anything else? I didn't.
No, that's all I had to report today.
Great. So I think that's our last agenda item, right? And I just I closed my browser on accident and I had the agenda up. So okay, great. I thought so. So so Jim, if you like, we could adjourn early if there are no more updates from staff and the commissioners didn't have any more questions for staff or from the liaisons.
Yeah, Jim, you'd be the best chair ever if you gave us that.
I was wondering what the
At least
alternative
do that.
was.
30 minutes
Take it
of our
here
day.
until the end of the scheduled
Well,
time.
Surrendering to public pressure and desires, I say we adjourn the meeting.
Wonderful.
Second.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.